Welcome to A Brief History Conspiracy.
This week, Atlantis.
If you're new to our channel, please consider hitting a subscription and a like on the video. It really does help. And this week we are 9600 BC in our chronology as we go through conspiracies and mysteries through time in order. It's a project, yeah. It's going to take us years. At one point, there's somebody asked me not long ago about when are we going to do so like JFK, and I said, at this rate, 2025.
Yeah, might get around to it.
We will get there at some point.
Certainly the next decade.
Yeah, most definitely. So this week we really are going to concentrate on the Richat Structure, or the Eye of the Sahara, as one of the possible locations for Atlantis.
Yeah.
This became sort of a popular theory about a year ago with a Bright Insight video that really went off. A fella called Jimmy does these videos, really good videos in there that he does, and he sort of really popularised this as a theory for where Atlantis might be. He based this on other videos that were on the Gaia network, which basically as soon as anything's on the Gaia network, I immediately just go nope. Because they don't seem to be very concerned about empirical evidence on that channel. It seems, but this is a fascinating possibility. So
Seems to be a bit. I think there's possibly some nuggets of evidence, perhaps in some of the stuff they've released, but it's probably like Ancient Aliens on the History Channel.
That type of level of I'm gonna go.
I'm not saying
proof.
it's aliens, but it's aliens.
I love that line. I love the meme. The kind of. I'm not saying it's aliens.
But yeah.
So it's always aliens. We keep saying this. It's always aliens.
I think he drew some insight into linking some things that perhaps hadn't been or I hadn't seen linked before.
And then I think he's in the great position then of that he's got a lot of people that watch his videos and like what he does, and then he was able to sort of took those comments. The one thing I like about Jimmy as well is he doesn't try to make out that any of this is his own. He really does tell people, you know, this is where I got this information from. Go and look for yourself. This is interesting. So I do like that. But then he got some really good comments from people that he then added to. But there are 3 videos. Please go and have a look. They're really interesting. We're going to critique it a little bit in a few places, but actually at the end of this video, we're going to tell you something that we found ourselves that actually add credence to this. I think. When we looked this up literally 5 minutes ago, I actually got quite excited. So where do we get this Atlantis story from? It starts with Solon, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, several generations before Plato, Solon was. And was told the story of the lost city of Atlantis, which had been passed down through the Egyptian priesthood for generations.
It was actually supposed to be the oldest library in existence at the time, which is why Solon went there.
Yes, the Library of Alexandria. Yeah,
but that since has been lost to the Nile Delta. So it's been it's gone. So there's no evidence of this bit. Solon learned that it was Egypt used to be a part of the empire of Atlantis. Which again, I actually think we're going to talk about when we get to the pyramids and things. I think is interesting. But then this family sort of story got passed on through generations to Plato, didn't it? And he sort of wrote it down. Yeah.
I mean, interestingly, it is the only historical account of the city of Atlantis, which could be because of how long ago it's claimed to be.
Yeah.
And the potential cataclysmic events of the last Younger Dryas that we suspect now occurred wouldn't perhaps leave much of the story or even people to tell the story.
True. So if you go back to our Younger Dryas video, we discussed this Younger Dryas event, and we do discuss how can you really argue that there wasn't some sort of ancient city that we describe as Atlantis? No, you can't. You can't really say that.
No, I think without a doubt there probably is an ancient civilization.
Because the mainstream science call this pseudoscience, which is a phrase that pisses me off. But
it's another phrase like the conspiracy theory in and of itself. It's become synonymous with there being a lack of evidence for the theory by its association with the word conspiracy. Yeah.
When you've got a subject like this, a lack of evidence doesn't mean something didn't happen, but at the same time, it doesn't mean it did. Yeah. So we've got that, but there is some. We've got quite a lot of evidence to say some sort of ancient civilization could have happened, could have existed. We just don't know in what situation, but we'll get into that. So, Plato wrote the Critias and the Timaeus about 2,400 years ago. And mainstream science believes this was a fable. It's a story. It's supposed to teach the Greeks not to be too up themselves.
Not to let power, corruption and power usurp.
Yeah, because I think you could argue that the Atlantis is actually a metaphor for the Greeks, because they a mighty empire, powerful militarily, high, wealthy, knowledgeable.
It was a warning for the Greek.
Yeah.
Society not to continue down the same line as the Atlantis,
and the Atlantic people were this powerful people that got the gods. They wound up the gods by being too
warring, wasn't it? It was supposedly because they
loved a bit of war, and too indulgent and all this sort of thing, and so the gods smited them and destroyed them in a single day in a flood.
Yeah, and the city sunk into the oceans.
First, good coincidence. This flood is supposed to have happened 9,600 BC, exactly the same time as the Younger Dryas.
Yeah, so the second temperature spike and massive sea level rise.
Yes, which we've already shown did happen. So, coincidence?
Chronologically, it's very interesting that it ties in to that exact period where we know that there probably would have been significant flooding due to the significant sea level rise.
And there's lots of geological evidence to show that there was massive flooding all over these areas. So it's incredibly interesting. So to get onto the Richat Structure, or the Eye of the Sahara, it was a place that actually was kind of lost to history until the Orion missions. So we went up into space, our astronauts were looking down and went, oh, look at that. There's a massive circular structure in the west coast of Africa. So this had really been lost to science until the 60s sort of thing.
Yeah, it's such a large structure. It's only really visible from the air. From the ground, it's just
from images on the ground, you can't. It just looks
can't tell it's a ridge on the horizon, isn't it? Because it's that.
Well, it's 48 kilometres across in places. So I mean, this is an enormous structure, and it does look weird. And it is these circular bands. Mainstream science says it was made about 100 million years ago, a volcanic thing. So the idea being that a magma.
Yeah, I think it was an extended period of volcanic activity that's caused the concentric circles.
They're talking about it being raised up and then dropped suddenly, and raised up and dropped suddenly.
To give it the concentric circles with the differing amplitude on the land masses in the different circles.
Now this is my first problem with Jimmy in the Bright Insight video, that he then makes the comment of, well, these mainstream scientists, they've never been there, so how can they have this guess and say that this is right? So Jimmy's never been there either. Lots of us have never been there, but it's still an educated guess based on what we know about geology and these sorts of things. And I would actually be pretty certain that is how this structure was formed. But I don't think that affects whether this was a city then, because he talks in the video about was it constructed, and then it's obviously had 10,000 years of erosion. I don't think humanity would bother constructing anything of that mass.
No, I think it's far more likely they took the use of a natural formation and then made a city from a naturally formed landmass that was ideal for a city to be built on. And I suppose that
imagine how defendable that location would be.
Yeah, it would have been.
I kind of wonder that as well. If this was a period where the environment as well was much different. Mm-hmm. We always talked about how during the last ice age, so we're talking 10,000 years ago plus.
Yep.
Say 12,000 years. Say they found ancient humans found this structure 12,000 years ago. The last ice age was at the height. The temperate zone was more south. So the Sahara wasn't a desert, it was a green, lush, wet area. You can see water erosion in the Richat, so there would have been areas where rivers were flowing into this structure.
Mm-hmm.
So can you imagine coming across this thing and seeing circles of water with then circles of land? You'd have thought it was made by the gods for you. You know?
Yeah.
It doesn't, because it would have looked insanely unnatural. It wouldn't have looked natural.
It wouldn't have looked like a natural formation, no.
That's where you would then set up your city, because you would think it was ordained by God.
Yes.
Or in this case, by Poseidon. They would have actually thought it was made for them. Particularly then, one of the other things they talk about this is that there's a natural spring water.
Yeah, that's fascinating, isn't it? In the central island, a natural spring.
So again,
bringing fresh water up,
assuming that's true, as an ancient people, you come across this structure and these islands and this massive structure again. You'd have, you would create myths about it. You would think this is made for us. And I totally understand that the people would have settled that area, would have settled the structure.
Yeah, I believe that.
And then we might have done work on it, and we would have built bridges and things. But I mean, I can totally see that as a thing, which we'll get to the first big sort of bit of evidence for this being Atlantis. Plato talks about it being around 23 kilometres wide, or one of the islands being 23 kilometres wide. Again, the guy on Bright Insight actually recorded this himself. He measured it using Google Maps, and he got between 21 to 24 kilometres across this one section. So that is all, pretty bloody bang on, really, how big Plato said it was.
Yeah, I mean, it's within a reasonable margin of error, isn't it, for something of that size?
It's pretty bloody close, isn't it, really?
When you think of a man approximating the size of it and probably not literally measuring it as well.
And then that being passed down through generations as well. I mean, I think that's honestly pretty bloody phenomenal, to be honest. But the point is that Poseidon had a son, or a couple of sons, but one of his sons was Atlas. And Atlas was then the first king of
Atlantis.